Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com, and today I want to talk about the upcoming ban list. The official ban list will be released April 24th, so let's strap in and get down to what I personally want to see banned or unbanned in their respected formats. In part 1 of this series, we'll be talking about Standard. Currently, Standard is being dominated by two decks, Crazy Cat Lady Combo, otherwise known as Saheeli Combo, and Mardu Midrange. If you combine the two archetypes, they make up a whopping 70% of the Standard meta, and tend to fill up the majority of 5-0 finishes, as you can see by these recent Standard League lists. The first, Saheeli Combo, uses efficient enter-the-battlefield abilities and Planeswalkers to later be abused by Felidar Guardian. From Oath of Nissa to Oath of Chandra, Rogue Refiner, and even Whirler Virtuoso, Felidar Guardian always comes down with a relevant ETB value effect attached to it. It also acts as an infinite combo when paired with Saheeli Ray, or can even flicker Chandra, Torch of Defiance, for 2 activations in one turn. The sheer strength of this deck is that it can switch gears at any given notice. Server the Conduit is an efficient mana ramp with also a formidable 2/2 body that can be an effective attacker when combined with Whirler Virtuoso and Rogue Refiner. All three add energy that then can be dumped into 1/1 Thopters and can lead to a fast clock to an opponent which has had to switch into defensive mode. They are also very effective at clogging up the board to allow Chandra Torch of Defiance to reach ultimate status. A lot of the games are actually won in this fashion. Many times opponents are too hyper-focused with shutting down the Felidar Saheeli combo that they get overrun by the team or troops. Without Felidar Guardian, I think the deck is still in a solid position, and giving it the ability to go off as fast as turn 4 has caused this deck to be extremely oppressive and difficult to shut down. Again, trying to focus on shutting down the combo is often a losing proposition, as the deck is very capable of playing either the aggro or mid-range role in any given matchup. To solve this, I think Wizards of the Coast should and will ban Felidar Guardian. The next deck that is in discussion for a nerf is Mardu Midrange. I call it Mardu Midrange rather than Mardu Vehicles because as the standard meta has progressed, this deck switched into more of a mid-range deck than the old aggressive vehicle strategy utilizing Veteran Motorist, Dapala, and Cultivator's Caravan. The newer versions are packed full of Gideon, ally of Zendikar, Thalia, Heretic Cathar, and even Archangel Avacyn. The only vehicles left are Heart of Quran and in some lists Aether Sphere Harvester. The deck is a very solid deck that has unarguably some of the best curves in Standard, with 2 efficient 1-drops, Thraben Inspector and Toolcraft Exemplar, into aggressive 2-drops, Scrapheap Scrounger and Heart of Quran, and then starts the beatdown, forcing opponents to react to the early aggression, leaving a wide-open Gideon to hit the board. It also has access to the most efficient removal spell in the format, Unlicensed Disintegration, and a very reasonable mana base with 2 fast lands and Spire of Industry that make fixing hassle-free. Personally, I do not find Mardu as much of a problem for the format as I do Saheeli Combo, as many decks can be tuned for favorable matchups against it. However, the argument can be made that this is just a rework of last Standard's pre-banned Boogeyman deck of U-White Flash that also utilized a very similar aggressive curve into Gideon and eventually had to be nerfed by banning both Smugglercopter and Reflector Mage. If we look for a common denominator to why this core white mid-range deck is probably too successful, it is obvious that Gideon, ally of Zendikar, is the culprit. Compact this with the fact that another 3-drop Gideon of Trials, will be joining the team with the release of Amonkhet, and you can see an even more difficult scenario emerging. For example, a first-turn Thraben Inspector into a second-turn Heart of Quran, followed up with third-turn Gideon of Trials, while neutralizing an opponent's threat and simultaneously smashing in for 7 damage on turn 3, followed by a turn 4 with 11 unanswered damage coming in while activating Gideon, and an Unlicensed Disintegration, for example, to finish things up or at least put your opponent on such pressure that they expend all resources and leave the board open for Big Daddy Gideon? Yeah, no thanks. I am completely on board with Gideon getting the axe. So how about cards that are currently banned? Many have proposed that now that we have some sort of graveyard hate in Amonkhet in the form of Scarab Feast, that Emrakul the Promised End would have sufficient hate, but I don't think that one card is enough. Furthermore, Aetherworks Marvel is still very much alive and well with Ulamog at the helm. In my opinion, for Emrakul to be unbanned, Aetherworks Marvel would have to be banned, which I'm not necessarily against, to be honest, but I still think that Emrakul is a poorly designed card that is just too efficient and backbreaking when it can be cast consistently for 7 mana. Reflector Mage is also still problematic. However, after it was banned, UITE midrange and tempo decks ceased to exist. You might make the argument that it was just the perfect storm with both Gideon and Smugglercopter in the same deck that made the Reflector Mage Time Walk too oppressive, and with both of them banned, it would likely not be an oppressive archetype. However, when going back to standards of the past, it was arguably Reflector Mage that pushed Bant Coco over the top, and is just too good for a creature-based format that is recently what Standard has become. Personally, I feel that Reflector Mage should remain banned. That leads us to Smugglercopter. I have mixed feelings about this card as it has had one of the highest dominance in Standard's history. At one point, it was over 80% of all decks were using 4 copies of Smugglercopter, and some of those decks had no business being in. Even brewers such as myself finally caved, and I found myself throwing it in decks like black-green tokens as it smoothed out draws and gave me an outlet to ditch redundant cards like multiple Cryptoth Rites or even Westvale Abbeys. At one point, even Metalwork Colossus decks were throwing it in as it was easily activated by Glint-Nest Crane for early looting to find the Colossus, or later down the road could even crew the Sky Sovereign console's flagship. However, at the time of Smugglercopter, there really weren't any efficient removal spells that deal with it. Fragmentize and Incendiary Flow were sorcery speed, and Fiery Temper, Unlicensed Disintegration, and Murder were just not on curve to effectively deal with the chopper. It also dodged spells like Galvanic Bombardment when it was just casting for 2, and Chandra's Pyrohelix. At the time, there were only 2 effective, non-narrow ways to deal with it, which were Grasp of Darkness and Harness Lightning. With the release of Aether Revolt, and now Amonkhet, there are many more efficient tools against Smugglercopter, from Release the Gremlins to Fatal Push, and now Manglehorn and By Force. We have a lot more answers than we previously had to the chopper. Harsh Mentor will also be able to punish the Copter, causing 2 damage every time it is crewed, but this is probably a minor inconvenience to most decks that will either find a quick removal spell or flat out ignore the taxing damage. The real problem with Smugglercopter though is not lack of answers, it is just that it is just too efficient of a card. The crew cost is relatively minuscule, especially with Thraben and Spectre in the format, and the card is really good in multiples. Early and late, with relatively no risk or drawbacks when it is compared with Heart of Khorne. The Heart of Khorne can only go in specific decks with the high crew cost. The Copter, however, as stated previously, can literally be thrown in almost every deck and called good. Smugglercopter is also too efficient with Madness and now Embalm, and does this while outclassing basically any 2 and 3 drop in Standard. Poor Sylvan Advocate, Grim Flare, and even Thing of the Ice have to watch helplessly as the Copter flies overhead or stays back in a defensive position. For these reasons, I think Smugglercopter should remain banned, which is a shame because I think the idea of the card is really something that Standard wants, an effective splashable looter. If they would have made this a 2/2 or made it read discard a card to then draw a card, or even took away the flying or only triggered on attacking not blocking, the card would probably not need to be banned, but as is, the card is just too powerful for Standard. In conclusion, I think 3 cards currently on the ban list are destined to and should remain banned. The risk to unban them is not worth going back to the archetypes or dominances they created. Felidar Guardian is priority number 1 to ban. If you go back to my earlier spoiler videos for Aether Revolt, my predictions were 100% true. In short, I claim that even if Felidar Guardian didn't lead to a Pro Tour dominant deck right out the gates, which it didn't, it wouldn't stop people from playing the combo and would lead to only decks that could disrupt or race the deck being viable. Which, as we know now, was basically Mardu Midrange. We could print 100 more answers to the combo and it still wouldn't be enough to disrupt the sheer value of the 4-color flicker strategy. Gideon is another beast that is just too good for Standard. From aggro to midrange to even control and tempo, Gideon is the obvious choice for the 4-drop slot. There is no reason to even look at Angel of Sanctions, Regal Caracal, or even Oketro the True when Gideon exists. I think with these 2 cards out of the format, we should see a variety of both aggro, control, and yes, even non-Mardu midrange decks coming back into the mix. I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and be sure to check back tomorrow for part 2 as we discuss modern bannings on unbannings. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for any of the other cards that you think should be unbanned or banned in Standard. Thanks for watching.